Good evening, everyone. This is Dedrick Martin, Superintendent for Caledonia Community Schools, and I am happy to be part of the team that's hosting this virtual town hall meeting. As we indicated, we want to begin promptly at 6 o'clock. It is 6 o'clock. We have asked everyone for purposes of eliminating any background noise or distraction, only the panelists will be speaking tonight. However, there's an opportunity to submit comments or questions, so please use your Q&A icon at the bottom of the screen. If you're participating through Zoom, and there will be two opportunities during the presentation where the panelists will be answering questions submitted. After this event is finished, we will also produce a FAQ document that will be published and addressed with the allotted time. So with that being said, I believe Ms. Flynn is in charge of the screen, so I'll ask her to, oh, there we go. So as we kick this off, I first just want to start out by, just kind of acknowledging this past year has been very difficult and has taught us quite a bit. It has taught us that we need to be flexible, nimble, and responsive. Our CCS staff, our students, and our families have consistently risen to meet the challenge that has been put before us. This year has forced us to grow and explore an alternative ways to get to the end goal of preparing our students for college and career readiness. We know not everything has been ideal, but we've been able to make some huge strides with virtual learning. And we found that some of our students even thrived in this environment. Instead of forcing these students back into in-person environment or having them leave the district for some other inferior virtual school program, we want to offer these students a new opportunity here at CCS. So tonight, we're going to share information about a new fully virtual K-12 online program that we're calling Cal Connected. This virtual school option will build off everything we've learned this year, but it will be completely different than what we did this past year. While last year we focused on meeting the needs of the pandemic and moving forward, we want to be more strategic and intentional with our virtual learning platform. Cal Connected offers a solution for those students and parents who are looking for an alternative to traditional face-to-face learning. It will be a separate virtual school that will not be connected to any one of the buildings in the normal sense. K-12 virtual students will be working to, K-12 virtual teachers will be working to develop a curriculum that meets the needs of our virtual learners. Our face-to-face students will be, teachers will be teaching in person. Cal Connected will require that families fully commit to virtual learning for the full year. Students will not be allowed to go back and forth in between in-person and virtual environment. So tonight, with that said, during the presentation, we're going to cover a few topics. We're going to speak to curriculum, staffing, timeline, enrollment, and support. But before we begin, I just want to reiterate that there are still many moving parts involved in launching Cal Connected this fall. And we'll do our best to answer your questions and give you the information you need both tonight and in the coming months so that we can all be better prepared. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Flynn.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. Well, as Dr. Martin said, we are excited to be able to launch a fully virtual K-12 online school for those students and families that feel this is a good fit for them. We know that that was when we did a survey last spring, and again, that was in the middle of the pandemic, that we had just a handful, less than 10% who were interested. And obviously with the multitude of changes this year and varying degrees of programming because of exposure and quarantine, we've had a variety of reasons why families picked one over the other, whether it was virtual, face-to-face, or hybrid. And so we want to make it clear that this is a fully online virtual option for those families, that this is the right fit for them. So one of the things that we did learn this year was the characteristics of a successful virtual learner. We know that when there's parental support and there's self-motivation and self-discipline by students, students are regularly in their courses online, they're engaged, they're patient, they're self-learners, they're goal-oriented. These are really the characteristics this year that we found, and that what the research shows across the nation with students that are successful as virtual learners. What we also learned was that we wanted to make sure that we had available options so that we didn't have roadblocks in the way. So for instance, not having an internet access at home, we didn't want that to be an option, or I'm sorry, a roadblock for families. So that would be an available option for families if the internet was not available. We have hotspot availability. We would have one-on-one devices, as we will for all of our face-to-face students this year. Students will be able to participate in varying degrees with extracurricular athletics and clubs. And they're going to have access to our Caledonia teachers, not just online, but also in a face-to-face setting. So while it will be fully online courses, students will have access, and we'll talk more about that, to virtually be with students or with teachers live, our own teachers, K-12, and also to be able to come in face-to-face and get support and help from students as well. So come into a physical building on campus, and we will talk more in just a minute. Well, Dr. Martin mentioned that, you know, some students actually thrived in virtual learning. We know that that's not for everyone, but one of the advantages that families told us or some of the advantages that families told us was, you know, maybe their student was able to move at a faster pace than they might be in a face-to-face classroom. That they had fewer distractions, that they didn't need to have all those distractions, and they could move more quickly through curriculum. That it enforced enhancing communication skills with students, meaning if they had to do something in writing or they had to do something via video, that it was different than being in a face-to-face kind of setting. Obviously, having to use more technology and creative ways to not only learn the curriculum, but also submit work and communicate with their instructor and with classmates. And it allowed a flexible schedule for families that needed it. So again, we heard that from families, that advantages of virtual learning. So with that, as Dr. Martin mentioned, we want to be more strategic and intentional. We know that this is not going to be able to happen over the summer, nor do we want that, knowing how crazy it all was last summer. We want to do this thoughtfully, methodically, and in a way that it's going to be quality for those that choose this. And we know that the majority of our Cal families will be face-to-face, but for those that small percentage that do want this option, this is how we're going to roll out the curriculum and content in the coming year as it relates to our district strategic plan. So in terms of a learning management system, we've had a virtual advisory committee of parents and staff, and then we've had an in-district virtual advisory committee, including the tech team, administrators, teachers that have used this, online mentors, and have reviewed several learning management systems. Some of the big issues that we had this past year with, especially at the high school, was integration with our student information system was not seamless because we were using a different learning management tool that didn't integrate. And so we have looked at that learning management tool along with others and have made the determination that Canvas will be our K-12 learning management system this coming year for the virtual school. So again, this will be strictly for the virtual school. It's going to allow us then to customize content and resources, and it also is going to really seamlessly integrate in terms of grading and other reporting with more, you know, availability for parent reporting and access than we've had in the past. Some of the things also that were locked down in the learning management system at the high school that was used this year, because it was a third party, we will be able to do, you know, have more things because we can, more things available to us, options to streamline some of this because we'll have it locally controlled. So our plan will be that we will start this coming school year with K-5, meaning we will have online content development work happening with the teachers that are teaching online. And we also want to indicate that unlike the K-5 option that was this past year, we will have scheduled synchronous learning time for the online student. So if a family chooses, let's say they're a third grader and they choose a fully online option for their student for the year, there will be weekly synchronous time where the teacher and the students are online together and the teacher is providing lessons, especially in the ELA and math areas for K-5. And so one of the other things that we wanted to focus on was being able to make sure that we allocated resources to be able to have our face-to-face teachers, let's take that third grade example, work a face-to-face teacher, work with an online teacher to make sure that that curriculum is more seamlessly aligned, that we know exactly where students are, and that if for some reason at a semester break, which will be an opportunity to make a switch, only at the semester, that we know where students are. We have a better sense of their academic progress. So we'll have more information coming out on that, but I also wanted to highlight the core content at 612. Because we are starting with locally developed content K-5 and know that it's a lot more detailed and comprehensive at the secondary level, we will be starting that the following year in the 22-23 school year. So for this coming year, learning management system is Canvas. For 612, we will have Michigan virtual core content with Caledonia teachers. And again, there will be consistent and scheduled synchronous time for those online students as well. I also want to highlight that if a family does choose fully virtual, that they will not have in-person electives during the day. So that they will take courses from the vast catalog of exclusive Michigan virtual electives, everything from guitar to advanced other world languages that we may not offer, like Chinese or American Sign Language. And so those will be, again, it will be a fully virtual option. And some of that just is the challenge in logistics if we were doing it other ways, because we explored other options of being able to offer electives in person and then some core content online. So for this first year, it's going to be just the fully online, knowing that we want to continuously improve and make this be better the following year. So that, it could be an option the following year where there's space in the building and there's students taking online, but they have options to take electives in the building. So we will continue the 612 content development over the next few years between the 22 and 25 school year, and just continually finding ways to not only get the content developed in our own system, but then having annual ways to review it. We know that, digitally assessments change, standards change. We know that, open resource links that may be included in courses may change or be broken. And so we're going to need to also think about by, a few years into this of how do we do this? How do we support this? What kind of staff do we need? What does it look like to have a continuous state of improvement and have a high quality online course K-12 for families that choose that, whether they're right now current families in our district or potentially even homeschool families down the road taking elective options if they could opt into this option down the road. In terms of staffing, as we mentioned, we are going to be putting information out as soon as enrollment happens about offering options to teach online for our own Caledonia teachers. As I mentioned, we're looking at doing a K-5 stipend amount, if you will, for teachers to pilot Canvas in their face-to-face classroom. So we'll talk more about that later, but we would like to offer an option for those that would like to test out an instance or a shell of Canvas in their face-to-face classroom as well, because we really want to get a sense down the road, now that we've gotten so familiar, of if students have to be out on an individual basis and they're in a face-to-face classroom, how can we continue the learning and make it accessible to them even if they're not in school that day. And then again, we're not sure what the staffing will be until we know what enrollment will be, and we'll talk about that in just a second. There will be some summer professional development for online and face-to-face teachers. Those that are going to be teaching online, there'll be required professional development, and they'll be optional for our face-to-face teachers. What's nice about our Canvas is that they also have ongoing support 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And we also have been meeting with a consultant with Canvas on just, again, being thoughtful over multiple years of how do we build this, how do we develop it, and how do we build a high quality online program built on what we've learned from this year and what we know works best, what is happening around the country and internationally even with online learning. So that's been really helpful and has helped provide us guidance, and will be continuing to help us provide guidance and communication to staff and community around what this is going to look like. And finally, in addition to the people that I talked about earlier that have been involved in this with the parent advisory committee and then these other opportunities for the mentors and teachers and technology team administrators to research and demo some of these learning management systems. Our technology team is currently testing some of the courses in Michigan Virtual that will go directly on our learning management system. And again, different than for the high school staff than the fall, because we had restrictions with using a third-party Brightspace through Michigan Virtual. With our own, we feel like from what we've heard, what we've seen, and what's been tested, that this is going to be a much more seamless transition with content being in the courses and ready to go when needed. So that actual testing has been happening and is happening this spring. In terms of a timeline, we listened to our stakeholders, and we wanted to, first of all, thank everyone, as Dr. Martin mentioned, for just everybody who's given feedback, whether it's been tough feedback to take or really positive feedback. We really appreciate people's time giving us feedback, everything from minor details to courses to, really just sweeping process, policy, system changes that have helped us to get to this point. It's amazing where we are a year later and how much we've learned. So we are planning to make staffing decisions after our enrollment applications are submitted in May. We'll talk about those timelines in just a second. So most likely those staffing decisions, if staff are interested, will be made in June. We are planning to have the, quote, Caledonia connected physical location be at Craft Meadows. It's next year going to be intermediate school because it will be a 5-6 building, but there will be a lab space there, a classroom space for students to get support and help. And also when students that are fully online need to come in and take state assessments or other one-on-one help. So that information and where those locations would be available in July, if not sooner. And then we talked about, similarly to last spring, when we launched those instructional continuity plans as part of our extended learning plan. It had different times by grade band. So, K1, I think it was 2, 5, 6, 8, and 9, 12. And it had set schedules of time when teachers would be online synchronously at the same time. And then what the asynchronous work would do in the amount of work or time investment it would be each week. So we will have those reviewed and by our teaching staff and revised to fit what we're doing here, but it will be similar to that, where each family would have that kind of an overview of, let's just say again, 3rd grade, to be able to go in and look and see what kind of time frame they're talking about and what kind of support they would need to provide their students should they choose this fully virtual option. And finally, we're hoping to have more aligned, both with face-to-face and online pacing guides, an assessment schedule, and what the testing requirements are as the school year begins. It should look very similar to what we do face-to-face, but options for students to be able to come in and test in a lab will be part of being an online learner this year. And with that, we're going to pause, and I'm going to turn over to the moderator for questions.
Great, thank you, Ms. Flynn. This is Steve Faber with Byram and Fisk. We do have a few questions that came in. I just want to remind folks that they are able to hit the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen if they are tuning in through Zoom and submit any questions. We will have a second Q&A time after a little more information is presented as well. So there'll be a time to answer additional questions as they come up. But we do have quite a few here. So first of all, will students be able to move freely between full-time in-person face-to-face learning and full-time online learning in the 2021-22 school year?
So that was one of the things that made it very challenging this year to do. So the answer is we will not be able to do that. All students will be default registered for face-to-face learning beginning in the fall of 2021. But families will be able to choose a fully virtual option, and they can complete an application and enrollment process during May. Once approved for fully online learning, then students would be able to make a switch back to face-to-face learning, but that would only be at the semester point. So at the semester change after semester 1. And then students obviously in full-time face-to-face learning would also be able to make a full switch to online learning at the end of the first semester, but switching back and forth a week at a time or 2 weeks or all of that for fully virtual, for this fully virtual option. I'm not talking face-to-face, just fully virtual. That will not be allowed.
And if I could add to that, the synchronous that we're speaking to is really synchronous between the online learning population, and it's not for all subjects. So if a student tried to switch back and forth, they would really be at a disadvantage the way this new system is designed. So it's not designed for them to switch successfully and freely back and forth the way they've done in the past.
Great. Another question, when will teachers build this curriculum, especially if it's launching this fall, or the components that are launching this fall?
Yeah, so we should in the next couple of weeks have the long-term plan that could start as early as spring for those teachers that are interested. So as we start hiring this, May, June timeframe, we will be laying out kind of what the expectations are for the teacher hiring and what the course development work will look like over the summer. There'll be flexibility with that, but really the plan for K-5 is to be working on enough over the summer to get started, knowing that there will be ongoing time allotted throughout the 21-22 school year for teachers to be working on this. So our goal would be to have a fully K-5 virtual programming by the end of this coming school year. So it will be a work in progress. Some of this will be content that we have researched and found available to us that could go on an online platform. Some of this is going to be teacher created that we already have, that we used, let's say, last March or April when we went online with Google Classroom. And some we may need to research and find out. We've got really good relationships with several other school districts that are much further along in this process than us, and they've given us a lot of insight on content and curriculum development. Along with what Canvas offers. Canvas has a lot of content and curriculum as part of purchasing the learning management system that is already available to us within the system. And so that is going to be available as part of this, decision to go with Canvas as well. So it will be an ongoing process, but the teachers will be supported in this, and they will have parameters within it, but they will be the ones that will be developing it over the course of this coming school year, starting as soon as this spring.
Great. So we have a couple themes coming in, a little bit around K-5 and a little bit about high school. So let's talk a little bit about K-5. Will the K-5 curriculum line up more with face-to-face? It was very difficult this year as Edgenuity's scope and sequence is completely different than what we are doing in person.
Yes. Yeah, that's our goal. We want the curriculum to be similarly paced to what the district approved curriculum already is, and of course aligned to state standards. So the pilot that I mentioned that we want to try to do is to have some teachers that will be face-to-face, and it will also work with an online teacher of the same grade level throughout the year, and make sure that what the curriculum is happening is very similar in terms of the week and time and content that's happening. Now, it may be delivered differently because it's virtually and face-to-face. I mean, it will be, but what that looks like. And so if there was a time where that semester change happened, that face-to-face teacher having the virtual student who'd been there for a semester, they should know exactly where they are. We want to, again, the other reason to have this link to PowerSchool is so that we have progress. We have things that we can do and expand in PowerSchool and the student information system that are going to allow us more access to where students are at a particular point in their learning. And so that's the other exciting part of this. So there should be, after this year, especially at the K-5 level, a much more seamless transition between what's happening face-to-face and in the virtual space, virtual school. And obviously the long-term for 6-12 is the same thing. We just can't tackle the whole, all of it at once. So that will be, again, the long-term goal, K-12.
Great. Moving a little bit into the high school, will the virtual curriculum and face-to-face curriculum for high school be the same?
Well, again, that's our long-term goal. We want to have teachers that are working together on that when we are developing content and curriculum, but for this coming year, it will not be the same. It will not be exactly the same for 6-12.
And then will virtual teachers next year at the high school use shells, or will we be forced to use Michigan virtual courses, since many of our shells this year were stronger courses for our students?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Shells or content? I guess if the question is referring to a face-to-face teacher at the high school who is not going to be an online teacher this year, and they are asking for a shell of Canvas to use, that will be an option for teachers to use. We haven't solidified the details of this as yet, but I know that there is options of some platform use like Google Classroom. Certainly not as robust as a learning management system, but a content hub, so that we don't have days where students don't have access to content should they need to be out for a quarantine or some other reason that they're not in school. So are we going to be forced to use it? No. Are there people that if they want to use an instance of a shell of Canvas shell for a course they're teaching face-to-face, that would definitely be an option. More information will be coming out on that in the coming weeks.
Yeah, I think, Kristen, the way I understand maybe the way they're asking that question is, if you're not going to be identified as an online teacher, do you have to use Michigan Virtual?
Oh, and you're teaching face-to-face?
Yes.
No, you do not. Why I took that in a way different direction. Sorry.
And maybe I misunderstood it.
I don't know. I could just no answer.
It doesn't hurt to answer it from both sides. So,
okay.
A couple more around high school. Will high school teachers have to be all virtual or all face-to-face?
I will say the answer is maybe. We actually had a call with the Michigan Department of Ed today. It sounds like that you could be both. So you could physically be in the building teaching, let's say, 4 face-to-face classrooms, and you're teaching one section online for the virtual school, and that's allowable. I think what their concern is about, I think MDE doesn't allow that for the majority. If the majority of your core content teachers are doing that, then that's a different setup than what we're trying to do. And that's not going to be the case for this coming year, we don't think, with the anticipated numbers of enrollment being relatively low. We might need to look at something different down the road, but you would not need to pick one or the other. Would we have options of teachers at the high school teaching fully online this coming year? I don't know, depending on enrollment. Like I don't see that happening. Most likely it would probably be a section of an online course versus being full-time online at this time. Not to say that that can't change or grow in the future. I don't know, Dr. Martin, did you want to speak to that?
No, I think it's just important to remind everyone that we don't anticipate a lot of kids being in this online environment the way we're designing. We're really looking for the small number of kids and parents who have told us that they do well online, they prefer online for a number of reasons. So initially, and we won't know until we get some results back from families, but initially we're thinking 5% or less of our students actually being in an online environment. And so this is truly for those families who have already been homeschooling through various means, and we have a number of them who go to other programs to not homeschool, but for online learning, or those who have determined that they like online learning, and we have heard from some. It is not the majority, so the default will be that people will be expected to be face-to-face unless it is their request to be in an online program. But it's very different. And generally, when you're building an online program, it's about a 5 to 7 year build. So it won't be perfect, but it won't be kind of what we had to just quickly throw together in the COVID era. So
there was some follow-up clarity to the earlier question about Michigan Virtual and the shell. And this ties in with another question we have as well. So the first part of that was, it says, I actually meant if teachers are virtual, will they be forced to use Michigan Virtual curriculum? And then somewhat related to that is feedback students have provided about Michigan Virtual is that it's extremely easy to skip the content in the module, go to the quiz test, and all the answers and quiz answers are Quizlet. Students do not need to learn the material. They can Google it all and get the answers. So if they're going to use Michigan Virtual for high school, how will this be addressed and improved moving forward?
Yeah, those are all in the weeds questions that we need to work out and figure out. And honestly, it's going to be a problem for us 3 years down the road with our own content online. We're going to run into kids who've had access to content, and it's an ongoing process to keep it developed, updated, revised, and make sure that the policies for, you know, plagiarism and cheating and all of that are worked out. Some of that moving ahead and skipping may have been, again, because Brightspace it was a third party of Michigan Virtual. Now that we have our own, we may be able to address some of those issues with not allowing students to be able to move forward in the course. So we have not gotten into that level of weeds, but I know that that's some of the stuff that we'll be looking at as we're testing courses and content, and certainly get the teacher voice in the middle of that, you know, to give us feedback on how to best do that. Now, in terms of the question that came up with, will we be forced to use it? I guess my response is if you're feeling like you're being forced to use it, then I wouldn't apply to be an online teacher, because yeah, that will be the curriculum for 6-12 for if you're a fully online student. That will be this coming year.
Okay. Trying to stay out of the weeds, but maybe a little weedy. It was a challenge to get AP courses through Michigan Virtual. So many AP teachers built a shell course instead. Will these shells be used in Cal Connected, or are there plans to get all AP courses through Michigan Virtual?
Well, all AP courses that are developed online that are not already accredited are going to have to be approved through AP College Board. So that's another reason why we would not be developing our own online. That's why we're using Michigan Virtual, because they've all been accredited and fully approved through the AP College Board process. So again, that's probably something that the AP teachers and I would have conversation about, what does that look like? But that process alone for us at the high school level to get those approved for our own virtual school is going to take some time. Just that piece alone, that's one element of a much bigger picture of all high school content being NCAA approved, much more stringent accessibility standards. If you look at the national standards for online learning, there's layers of both the tech side and just students being able to access courses with you know, significant disabilities. What does that look like? So that we have layers of stuff. So this is one layer that we would need to look at and address. That's probably going to take us a few years to do.
Thanks. I think this one is a little similar, so maybe we can just knock it out as well. Okay. What about courses that we teach that Michigan Virtual does not currently have a curriculum for? Business, TV Pro, AP Lit, etc.
So
I don't think those would be an elective option for.
So
if a kid is choosing to be 100% virtual, then they're going to be stuck with the elective options that are already identified in Michigan Virtual.
Correct.
Great. Okay. Little change of gears, but just wanted to address a couple questions that came up about switching between and kind of the semester schedule. So the question is, please reiterate whether students will be allowed to switch between online and face-to-face at the semester. In high school, our face-to-face classes may be more rigorous than the Michigan Virtual curriculum, and our sequence of units may be different. And then sort of another question that came in related to that, can students switch to in-person learning at any semester or just the first semester? And then what if we're not on a semester schedule yet? So sort of the semester question and switching between face-to-face and virtual.
Okay, I'm not,
So
okay.
So the goal is to have them only at the semester, because the reality is if a family moves in, or if they do schools of choice at the semester break, so when we were on trimester, it didn't always line up, but if a family came schools of choice, we had to work with them. But with that being said, this, again, this is not designed to be the free back and forth 100% match. What you do in the classroom today is going to be exactly the same as online, because the electives will be different based on what is offered in the program. There will be some synchronization, and as we evolve over time, and we get more sophisticated, like we see with other districts who've been doing this for years. But if we're thinking that this is going to be, I'm teaching this today in class and the online is doing this, and the online have this elective that's not in Michigan virtual and they're going to log in, that's not really what we're talking about here, I guess, if I'm understanding that correctly.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't know what the question was, can they switch at any semester? I guess I don't know what other semester there would be.
I think like
second semester, they would, again, we would default to the following year to face-to-face learning, and people would opt into fully virtual learning.
Yeah, our K-8 is still, their grades are not semester like the high school. So I think that's probably a question with, as it pertains to if an elementary or middle school kid is wanting to switch at the semester break, will they be allowed to switch, or does that look different since we've kind of converted the high school to semester, but not K-8 as of yet? Is probably the way I'm thinking.
Yep, there was a corresponding question, which is elementary moving to semesters next year, or are they staying with the current trimester system? So I guess maybe the question about, maybe it was less about semesters and more trimesters, or and whether switches could happen in the lower grades.
Yeah, so we were hoping to switch to semesters, but with trying to maintain everything that we have, as well as all the extras with COVID, we won't be able to make that change this coming fall for K-8. So we'll have to defer that to the fall of 22. But even still, I think our intent is to say there will be a time period that will match up with the semester break, where we would probably say if a family wants to switch from virtual to face-to-face, or face-to-face to virtual, that would be more appropriate, versus just almost every other week we have a new request wanting to switch for some reason. And that one of the things that we struggled with last year is that we strongly said that a constant changing probably won't be good for the kids, but it definitely won't be good for instructional programming, and it was going to provide challenges with staffing. So we started out with a number of staff members, and then we saw a big push to change our deadline, and we changed it, and all of a sudden we had like a third of our high school kids online, or not a third of our high school kids, but a pretty significant, about 20% of our kids online. We weren't adequately prepared or staffed at that level to change that quickly. So we're trying to keep a much tighter rein on that this year.
Great. So I think we can pick up a couple other questions in the part 2. It's around, yeah, we got about 20 minutes left. So why don't we finish up the presentation, and then we'll come back to a couple more questions. Again, if anybody has any questions, they can hit the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen and submit those.
Okay, so enrollment is going to be opening soon. It will be through the parent portal of PowerSchool if families wanted to opt into fully virtual. There's an enrollment, there will be an enrollment application there. And the enrollment window is going to run from May 10th through the 28th by 11:59 p.m. And we will notify families of the acceptance by June 4th is the goal. What then we are asking is that if there's any extenuating circumstances where families wanted to opt back into face-to-face, that they would wait until a window of time that we're designating in August, so that we wouldn't be doing this all summer long back and forth, but they would have a window of time, a week time, where they could make a change if something, some family situation, something had changed over the summer, which we, again, feel will be very few families in that instance. And we also wanted to just, we think about selection criteria, we want to make sure that students have previously been successful in online learning, that they've been consistently engaged. So we'll be seeking feedback from, the school where students were online this past year. We want to make sure we have parent and guardian commitment, knowing that this is not, especially at the younger grades, it's not just students sitting in front of a computer for 8 hours a day, that there is, a parent engagement and support. And really just, determining the selection on potentially some extenuating family circumstances. We had lots of those this year. So some of the criteria that we'll be using will be that, but really we want to make sure that this is the right fit for students. In terms of supports, some of these systems really didn't even exist when we started this last year. And so I'm really proud to report that we're going to have social emotional support, counseling availability for students. And we'll talk more as this becomes more, I guess, fleshed out. But we also are going to be providing, as we are required to, that students who are eligible under Section 504 or IDA accommodations and support virtually. We also excited to report that we are also now going to continue to have lunch and breakfast options for all Caledonia students, so in terms of nutrition. And as I mentioned earlier, students will be issued a Chromebook and technology support that will be available online if students need help and support with their actual technology. So even though they're not physically in a building, they can still get technology and support from our technology team. And or, as I mentioned, there'll be access 24/7, 365 days a year for teachers and students, with Canvas as well. And one of the points I wanted to mention, a reference here before we get to questions, are that if you have additional specific questions that you cannot get answered, that David Andersma, who's been our lead online learning mentor for K-8, and Taryn Abraham has been for 9-12, they have been parts of these meetings that we've had. They've been part of the strategic planning. They've been part of testing these out and talking to teachers and mentors. And they are willing to take other questions that they're going to kind of capture. And as I have weekly standing meetings with them, they're going to start capturing those questions for us to get answered. And if you didn't get it answered here or something comes up afterwards, just in a more timely fashion, instead of emailing them to me directly, if you have them specific for K-8, email them to David Andersma at andersmad@calschools.org, or Taryn Abraham, abrahamT@calschools.org.
Great. We have a couple more questions. One will be, again, high school. So will the high school face-to-face students be using Michigan virtual curriculum?
I think we answered that. The answer is no.
Good. Nice to reiterate the answer, I suppose. And then a little bit about kind of you just touched a little bit on the kind of the social emotional health of students. It sounds like there are some concerns out there related to just how students are going to be connected with and continue to work on their development. So how are students checking in so they have an opportunity to meet with a professional who can get to know them to help assess their mental health?
Yeah, all of that is still yet. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I think just some of the thoughts maybe it's not developed yet, but some of the thoughts you're having in terms of how do these students still feel part of the Caledonia Community Schools family?
Yeah, and that's stuff that's yet to be developed. We just know that was a huge issue this year. We know that we can't have students that are disengaged for months at a time. We know that when, let's say, a high school teacher's time, like it was divided this year between online and face-to-face, and it was an insurmountable task. I mean, it was huge. So if they are strictly a virtual teacher for that particular hour, they're not doing face-to-face and online in the same hour, we're going to be expecting them. We'll have to build some protocols and systems that we've learned from other online schools on how to keep connected to those students and how to get them the right kinds of resources. So all of that is yet to be determined, in addition to just, policies of working and teaching in a virtual setting versus a face-to-face setting. Like, what does that look like? All of that is still in the works. and we'll have voices of the people who are closest to the work involved in that.
Great. A question related to reasons for sort of piloting around K through 5 instead of at the high school level, and any other thoughts you have just related to why this is a priority for the district right now.
About why we're piloting?
Yeah, why pilot? Why sort of start with the lower levels instead of the high school levels?
Well, number one, there is a lot more content available in the online learning space at the 6-12 level. There is very little quality, as I'm sure those of you we learned this year at the K-5 level. And we believe that we can do a much more quality job with what's available in the space than not. We also know that it's going to take us a lot longer to get going at the 6-12 level. There are a lot more moving parts to even get it up and off the ground. And part of the consideration was not overburdening our staff all summer, which would have been that. We want to have available time to roll this out, to do it right, to not have the stress and pressure like we had last year to roll out a virtual program that normally takes 9 to 12 months to unveil, and do that in 5 weeks. And that we didn't want to have that stress and pressure. And there's just a lot more, like I mentioned earlier, implications and approval processes and things to get fully virtual courses in a Michigan Department of Ed virtual school up and running at the secondary level. So we have available options. There are things certainly that we like and we don't like about Michigan Virtual or any other content that's available at the 6-12 level. But we feel like there's enough available quality content for now until we can get that up and running and get the right systems in place to do our own.
Great, thank you.
Steve, was there a second part to that question?
I think the question was sort of, why is this a priority for the district? And I think just reading through some of these questions, a lot of us have experience this year with virtual curriculum. And it sounds like at least, Caledonia Community Schools is looking forward to how do we really make this an exceptional program for students, not just sort of a stopgap. And so maybe if either of you could speak a little bit to why this is becoming a priority for the district right now.
So sure. So a couple of things that I think is important for everyone to know. From the very inception, within 2 weeks of going online last year, as well as this year, there have been parents who've expressed an interest in staying online. It worked for their family, whatever their family situation was or how their students were as learners. I think I am very clear that it is not the majority. It is a minority group of families. However, between various online programs that already exist, homeschool opportunities, and some of our families who, because of COVID, have newly experienced online, there is a group of Caledonia families, Caledonia students, who online works for them. So to that end, we want to service our own community and do it in a better way. And over time, those districts who have put together a high quality online program not only saw serving segments of their own community that they weren't previously serving, they actually saw growth in that, which is another way to grow your enrollment over time. But this is something that we want to do better than what we did this year. As I talk with just other districts, I think all districts are looking at online learning in some form or fashion is here to stay. This is something that we typically just allow parents to go wherever they wanted to. And we've never stepped into this arena, but since we were kind of forced to with COVID, and looking at what worked and what didn't work, and all the research related to this, we feel like we can provide a much better experience for our Caledonia families who have already been doing or interested, or even Caledonia families who have been homeschooling, but might be looking to supplement their homeschooling with a Caledonia online experience, but still not comfortable in coming in a face-to-face environment in the traditional sense. So in essence, we think we can do this better. But it's going to look very different and grow in a different way.
Thank you. A couple questions related to how the virtual student will interact with the in-person student. And again, I think this kind of ties into how do they feel part of the community and the CCS family. So a question just related to someone saying, you know, I'm a parent of an incoming 5th grader. He or she has some concerns about online students sort of roaming or interacting day to day with face-to-face 5th and 6th graders. So just sort of what you're anticipating the interaction, or how all, you know, full-time virtual students might be interacting or having access to schools or buildings, et cetera.
Well, on a regular basis, they wouldn't be interacting at all in terms of the school day. They would be fully virtual in their home or some other place. There are going to be windows of time where we would need to make sure that the lab space was available when face-to-face students were not, you know, walking through the halls and having lunch, but there would be available times to come in and do testing within a lab space. And, you know, that would be designated in an assessment schedule that we would be working on, that families would know about in advance. I guess in terms of extracurricular, there would be students that are fully online that would still have the opportunity at the secondary levels to participate in sports. That's still an option. But during a regular school day, they wouldn't be interacting at all.
Yeah,
Okay.
it would not be a free-for-all. They just can come, it's a Tuesday, I feel like going in. It would be structured. We know who's coming in because they need support, but not just they come and go as they please. That's not what we're looking to do, because we still would have to maintain the safety both ways for students who are fully online, but maybe coming in to work with the staff member because they need some help in a structured situation that might only come in once or twice or periodically. But those things are still kind of being worked out, but it's not like they just show up every day and sit in front of a computer next to a teacher online, or they get to come and go freely and roam the halls and do stuff like that. No.
Okay, just a couple more. Question about IT and IT requests. And maybe this is more of a suggestion than a question, but will students have a way to send help desk IT requests without having to go through other staff members, and the experiences of this year where that staff got stuck in the middle sometimes in terms of
none of that's on the list of things to consider. None of that's been, you know, figured out yet. We aren't that far down the line, but that has been brought up as a concern.
Great. And then how will this change or impact how the district handles possible future shutdowns? Thoughts of how this prepares for any future pandemic, or if the current pandemic takes a turn for the worse?
So this would be completely separate. Fully virtual wouldn't have anything to do with that, because they would still be doing the same thing they would be doing regardless if we had a pandemic shutdown. That's a different conversation and probably a different town hall about how we would manage that face to face, and what would happen in the fall. And that is also being discussed, but that wouldn't have anything to do with this particular conversation.
Yeah, and so as I've talked to some superintendents who have been doing virtual for years, some of the learnings that got out of that. They were very clear with families that if you are going to online learning that was more so pandemic related, that was very different than their online, full online program, because what started as a few students grew into a few hundred over the course of years. And so in a lot of cases, they discouraged families from even doing that. And so they dealt with going into hybrid or going into fully virtual, completely separate and apart from their online learning program. And so that's something similar to what we're looking at. So we're assuming that things will be looking more positive in the fall in terms of just more people vaccinated or natural immunity. But if we have to go into a hybrid, or the state tells us that we have to shut down, then we probably look at something similar to what we did in the past with Google platform, and doing that for all of those families and who are in the traditional face-to-face version. But this, again, this is really geared for a subset who is interested in online, and that has been expressed to us, for whatever reason that they prefer. This is really geared for teachers who want to be a full online teacher. There will be some opportunities where maybe you can teach one course online and not a full day online, but this is not a one-size-fits-all, which is kind of what we've done through the pandemic so far, a one-size-fits-all. This is more specific for those families and those students who truly benefit and excel for online learning, and to provide some consistency with that instructional environment there.
Great. That is all the questions that we have tonight. So there's about 3 minutes left for any wrap up. Thank you.
So Kristen, I'll let you go if you have any parting comments, and if we don't have any questions before I finish up.
Well, just wanted to let people know that if you haven't been to previous town hall meetings, that we've had several other virtual. We hope to in May have really just a recap of the last year, an end of year celebration and updates of what's actually transpired. We're all in our own little space and world. And when you look at it globally of how much we have actually accomplished as a district and the sheer volume of change and pivoting that we've had to do, it's pretty remarkable. And so I'm really excited about our May town hall. Thank you again for joining us tonight. Hopefully we can get some additional questions out to you via their FAQ document, and certainly encourage you to reach out to Taryn or for 912 questions, and David K8 if you have further questions about what this could look like, and those will filter through to the curriculum team. So thanks for joining us tonight. Appreciate your time.
All right.
Dr. Murphy?
Sure. So one of the things that I think is important for everyone to understand, our default will be face-to-face instruction for next year. That is our default enrollment for students. If they do not specifically sign up for Cal Connected, they will not be in online. And so assuming that we will be starting school like normal, with whatever the recommendations that the state say we have to do, if it's with wearing a mask or social distancing, we will be face-to-face and following those as those changes come. As far as for online, we are very clear and conscious that online learning is not for all students, and we're not trying to build this for all students. There are characteristics that was shared in terms of characteristics of a successful virtual learner. And so this is a conversation that I think families and students need to have if this is truly a mode of learning that fits for them. But in that space, we already have a number of students, even before the pandemic, who live in Caledonia, who enroll in other schools, online programs. And so with that, over time, we want to put our own stake in the ground and start servicing our own students in our own community who are already been choosing online for the other school programs that offered it in a full K-12 online environment. So we will move methodically and carefully, but we do feel like this is a good direction for those families who need it. We will have face-to-face as our default for all. We will try to identify those teachers who have a desire or a strong desire to be in an online environment. But this is not a one-size-fits-all that everyone have to be in. This is for those who opt to be into it. So with that, I want to end by thanking again all of you, because this has been a very interesting year for everyone, from teachers to custodians to secretaries to administrators, as well as our parents and students. We have had some phenomenal positive things that have occurred this year, even during the pandemic, but we have all been challenged. And I don't think I've talked to an administrator or a teacher who haven't just been able to say that this year has been tough on everyone in every way. But I commend you guys for doing the things that you do, because I think it still lends to the fact that we still have a strong brand here in Caledonia, and we will find a way to continue working as a team to serve the students and our community to the best of our ability. So thank you for attending tonight. If you have some additional questions that you didn't get answered, you can still submit your questions. We will put them in an FAQ and try to answer all the questions. And over the next several months, I'm sure we'll have a little bit more detail worked out as we continue to evolve this programming. So thank you. Have a good evening.